This exercise, we're going to construct a 3D model of a worker standing at a workbench. The workbench is going to be 200 centimeters wide, 100 centimeters deep, and 90 centimeters high. The worker is going to be based on a 5 percentile female height with average body proportions. And we're going to construct hemispheres representing how far this worker can reach in space around their shoulders without bending or twisting. We're going to then find the intersection of these hemispheres with a workbench top to show how far they could actually reach and touch something on the surface of the workbench without bending or twisting. And we'll add some dimensions to it. We're going to use AutoCAD for this to create this model. I'm working with the Windows version here, and what you see here is what AutoCAD looks like when you open it. It opens in a drafting view. So the first thing we're going to do is set our units. So type units. Make sure you spell it right. And I'll set the precision so it only shows 1 decimal point. That gets me down to the nearest millimeter. And I'll set the units here to centimeters, and that should be good to go. I'm going to create some layers. So I'll come up here and find my layer palette. And oops, wrong icon. There we go. I'm going to create a layer for the bench. So let's tell new layer, and we'll call that bench, B-E-N-C-H. Let's make that bench, give it a kind of a distinctive color. We'll maybe make it kind of a blue-green. Looks good. Okay. I'm going to make one more for my 5 percentile female, and make another one for an 85 percentile male. So let's call this one F5. And we'll make this one maybe kind of a pinkish color. Okay. And then we would come up here and we'd create another one for our 95% male, M95. And we'll make that maybe more of a blue color. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to make the bench the active layer because I'm going to make the bench first. So that's active. Now, right now I'm in a drafting view, so I'm going to come down here in the lower right corner. I'm on a Windows machine, so I'll click, find this little icon that looks like a gear. I'll click on it, and I'll get a pop-up menu, and you'll see it says drafting and annotation. It has a check in front of it. That's where we are now. I'm going to come down to where it says 3D modeling. And when I do that, you'll see I get some extra commands up here, and or some extra tool palettes for 3D. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over here to this view cube, and I'm going to click on a corner of it here. And what you'll see is it immediately pops into a 3D kind of mode with X and Y in the horizontal plane and Z sticking up. And I'm going to kind of swing this around until I get my x-axis kind of pointing down and to the right, my y-axis going up to the right, kind of the way we learned it in analytical geometry many years ago. I'm going to zoom out here, and now I'm ready to start drawing. So I'm going to jump right in and use my box tool to make a top. This is very similar to the rectangle tool in 2D version or drafting view, except it's going to have a third dimension for just specifying a top. So I'm going to type 200, 100 to make my bench top. And then it wants to know what the height is going to be, and I'm going to make that 5 for 5 centimeters. Turn. And now if I zoom out, you should see my bench top here. Come into view. Okay. A little bit more. There's okay. So I got a bench top, except it's on the floor, and it's maybe a little hard to interpret because it's in what we call a wireframe view, which means it's just showing lines for the edges. If I come up here in the upper left corner, you'll see something where it actually says 2D wireframe, If I click on that, I get a drop down allows me to change the visual style, and you can play with these to see which one you like best for what you're trying to show. But I'm just going to grab the one that says conceptual, and you'll see that now it fills in those surfaces and shades them a little different colors so I can see which surface I'm working on. Okay, so we got our bench top. It looks like a bench top. It's got a nice color to it. So I want to raise this up to a real working height. Right now the top of it's sitting on the floor, and the top of it's 5 centimeters above the floor. So I need to move the whole thing up 85 centimeters. And I'll do that using the move command. I'll select the bench top, return, click on a corner, and I'll just kind of pull this up. Now be careful that you come up with a straight or parallel to the y-axis, because it's easy to kind of get off axis here. And actually it's worth coming down and turning on your ortho control so you actually bring this up at right angles, or so that you're always moving parallel to the x or y z axis. You can turn that off, of course, if you want to go at a different angle. So I'm going to move something, and I'll just type 85, and there's my top floating in space. Let's put some legs under it. And to do that, I'm going to come back to my view cube and get a view that gives me a little bit look at the underside of the bench. I'm going to get my box. I'll start here in the left corner, and I'll just kind of come in from that left corner. It's going parallel to the XY plane. And I'm going to type 1, 0 for 10 centimeters in one dimension, and 1, 0 for 10 centimeters in the other dimension. And then I'm going to just pull this down, and the bottom of the bench is 85 centimeters above the floor. So if I want to get back to the floor, I got to make this 85. And there's one leg. Let's go ahead and make a second leg, but rather than just use the box command, I'm just going to use the copy command. And I'm going to select this leg. Okay, hit return. And I have to select a base point. I'm going to select a base point that corresponds to the point where I want to anchor the leg, which is the outer corner. And let me zoom in on that a little bit again and get this down here where I can see what I'm doing, and make sure I get right in that corner. Should be like that. Great. Okay. Now I'm going to zoom out here, and I'm going to copy these legs and move them to the other corner. And again, I'm going to select a base point and a final point that correspond to each other. So I'll use move, and I will select both legs, return to tell I'm done selecting, zoom out here a little bit so I can see, find my corner, click on it, and move to the opposite corner. And now I've got, oops, I used move, I should have used copy, my mistake. Well, I'll just make it again, do it again. So I'll just this time type copy instead of move, select my legs, okay, return, zoom in on this a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. Again, select the base point here that corresponds to the point where I want to place this on the other side. Now I can hit escape to tell what I'm done. And now I've got a bench with 4 legs on it, and I can come back to my view tube. Instead of looking at it from the underside, I can look at it from the top side, and there's my bench. Okay, next thing is to construct my worker. So I'm going to go back and make the worker layer active. I'll find my layers palette here, and come down here and make F5 layer active. Close this. Now I want to place my worker in the I want to center my worker on one side of the bench, and then I want to have them displaced over 10 centimeters. So I'm going to just put a temporary reference line here between the 2 legs of the bench, something like that. Okay, that looks good. I'm going to come up here and get the polyline tool, and I'm going to come down here and find the center of that line, and then I will come out 10 centimeters, and then I'm going to go up, make sure this goes straight up, make sure it's a dashed line, and I'm going to type the height of the shoulders above the floor, which is 123 centimeters, and then I'm going to go horizontally to the right, and that distance from the center of the body to the right shoulder should be 19.4. And then I'm going to go forward the distance from the shoulder to the fingertips, which should be 66.2. type return to tell it I'm done. So now I've got a stick figure representing the torso, the shoulder, and the arm. And I'm going to hide the bench here so I can see my worker a little better. So let me go back and turn on my layers palette. And let's hide the bench. Oops, hide the bench. There we go. Now I can see the worker a little better. And I no longer need this reference line here I used to locate the worker, so I can select that and just hit erase, or E for erase. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is create this hemisphere around the shoulder, but I'm going to start doing that by using the circle tool to show how far they can reach in the plane of the shoulders. And so I'm going to come up here and start from the center of the circle and come out to the fingertips, and there's a circle. So this gives an idea how far they can reach in front of the body at shoulder height. So let's use the trim tool and trim that down to size because we are interested in the space behind the torso. So towards that end, I'm going to get the trim tool, but I've got to specify the part of the circle that I want to trim away. I just want to preserve this, like I said, a quarter of it. So I'm going to get a line tool, go to the right shoulder, and I'm going to just temporarily create a line here that goes out to the side from the right shoulder that intersects the circle. Now when I type the trim command to trim, I can come back, and if I click on this, it'll remove all the circle outside of this 90-degree arc. And I'll click return until I'm done. Then I'm going to select that line I created. That was just for construction purposes, and type E for erase, and it's gone. So the next thing I want to do is I want to revolve this around the arm, outstretched arm there, to generate a right arm, or my reach hemisphere. So I'm going to use the command revolve, R-E-V-O-L-V-E. I'll select the arc as the part that I want to revolve. As now it says specify the axis, so I'll take the fingertips as one end of the axis, the shoulders the other end, and you can see right away it starts to rotate this around the arm. So I can bring it up here till it kind of comes back and snaps in that corner, or I can just type 360 and I'll have my arc, or I'll have my hemisphere. Now you notice it's kind of hard to see my lines representing the stick figure against the background. So this is a place where it's kind of handy to go back and switch to a 2D wireframe. So now I can see the arc and or the hemisphere, and I can see the arm better. Next thing I'm going to do is make an hemisphere for the left arm, but rather than do this again, I'm just going to copy and move. But I got to put a line here representing the left shoulder. So again, I'll start from the midpoint between the two shoulders, come out here parallel to the x-axis, and again that distance was 19.4. Type 19.4. There's my line. Oops, and I guess I typed 194, so I'll type U for undo. I'm going to again go line. Start here at the midpoint. Come out here 19.4. Return. Okay, that looks better. Now I'm going to actually I guess I need a let's see, this I use the polyline for this, so I'm going to actually break that into individual lines. I'm going to do that using the explode command because I want to be able to copy the arm, not the whole linkage system here, and make that my left arm. So I'm going to select the right arm, I'm going to select the hemisphere, and then I'm going to go copy, and it's going to ask me to specify the base point. I'm going to take the base point as the right shoulder, and I'll come over here to the left shoulder, and now I've got my right and left arms, and I've got my right and left hemispheres. If I go back now to a realistic view, oops, I don't want to close this, I'll cancel that. So I'm going to come back here, my wireframe. I'll go to conceptual view, and you can see my worker. Let's get the layers properties window here, and I will get the turn the bench back on, and you can see the worker against the bench. I can kind of rotate this and look at it from different directions. That's kind of cool. Okay. So I can use that to get an idea where I can place things for use with both hands, for use of the left hand, or use of just the right hand, or if I don't want to bump something, where to put it so I won't accidentally reach out and knock over my coffee cup or something. Okay, so the next thing is I want to map out how far somebody can reach on this surface. So I'm going to come up here where I created this layer I called, oops, I didn't create a layer, so I'm going to make a new layer. And I'm going to call this layer F5 reach. Okay. All right, and we'll just make F5 reach the active layer. And I'm going to make that, actually, I'm going to just go ahead and make that those white lines. Okay, good. So I'm going to use something called the section tool for this. So I'm going to type section. And it's going to ask me to select objects. So I'm going to select the reach hemispheres. Return until I'm done. Now it says specify the plane, section plane. And I'm going to make a plane that corresponds to the top of the workbench. So I'm going to go here and click on the upper left corner of the bench, the lower right corner, and the upper right corner, and that should define a plane for me. And you can't see it, but those lines are there. And this will be a little easier to see. Again, if I go back to a, well, first of all, it'll be easier to see. I shouldn't have hidden my layers window. So let's go back and turn that back on for a second. And I'm going to hide the worker view in my view. Okay, and now you can see these lines. They show up quite nicely. I'm going to put a rectangle on top of the bench. So when I hide the bench, I'll still be able to see where the edges of the bench are. So I'm going to type rectangle. Okay, and I'm going to select again the one corner of the bench and the opposite corner of the bench. See, I don't think that was right. Rectangle. Let's go on this up far leftmost corner. No, okay, there we go. Right corner. Good. Okay, now I'm going to hide the bench itself. Okay, and now you can see I've got my reach limits here, and I've got the rectangle indicating the footprint of the bench. I don't need these parts sticking out here from the edge of the bench, so I'm going to get trim. And I can just go along and cut these guys off. They're kind of a nuisance. They look like something you're going to get poked on. Okay, so there's the bench with top of the reach. So let's put some dimensions on this. Now the thing is if you try to use a dimension tool like this, it probably won't work. So what you need to do is define a user coordinate system that defines the XY plane so that it corresponds with the bench top. So I'm going to come up here to where my view tube is, and below that we see something that says world coordinate system. If I click on that, I'll get a drop down that says I can specify a new user coordinate system. So I'll click on that and it wants to know where I want to put it. So I'm going to come down and click on a corner of the bench. And then it wants me to orientate my x-axis. So I'm going to orientate that so it goes along the long edge of the bench closest to the worker. I'm going to come out here to the locate the y-axis, and I'm going to use the short edge on the worker's left. And now I've defined an XY plane that corresponds to the surface of the bench. And now I can use the dimension tool. So I'm going to get the dimension. I'm going to type DIM. And let's go ahead and put the dimension here as the reach, as the horizontal distance, the maximum horizontal distance that you can reach with both the right and the left hands. So I'm going to go and find this point and come down to the one on the right, and then I'll come out here maybe 20 centimeters, something like that. And right away you can see this is too small to see, so we've got to go to our dimension styles and enlarge the font here considerably. So I'm going to go DIM STYLE. It'll open the dimension style window. I'll go to modify, and I'm going to go to fit. And basically there's a place where I can set the overall scale here, and default is 1. I'm going to change that to 20 based on previous experience. And then I'm going to come up here where it says primary units, and I don't want 4 digits to the right of the decimal place, so I'll change that to 1 point or digit to the right of the decimal place, which gets me down to the nearest millimeter. And I'll type OK, and I will close this window. And now you can see that the dimensions blow up to a reasonable size. Okay, let's do some more dimensions. I'm going to go DIM. Let's get the outer limit that defines the area that you can reach with either the right or the left hand, but not both. Okay, something like that. And then we will do this again, and we will get the width of the bench. And that should be about 200. Bring that out like that. And make sure we keep these dimensions equally spaced, and they're off to the side of the drawing. Now we'll do the same thing here to the side. I'm going to start with this corner here. I'm going to click on the intersection of these two arcs, which again gives me the area that you can reach with both the right and the left hand. So like that. And then we'll just add the depth of the bench there. Bring that out about the same distance. And there we are. We've got our bench top with the dimensions on it. I could superimpose this on the bench simply by turning on the bench layer.